Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. I published an episode this morning, an interview with my friend Rashika, who's a community herbalist in London. And I hope you have had a listen. It's a really lovely interview all about kind of herbalism work, like in a sort of more grounded kind of community context. And I think what she's doing is super inspiring. So please have a listen. This episode, I actually wanted to talk about my new book. It's the Herbalism and State Violence book. I kind of officially launched it yesterday on my day. It's been so much work. I've been on a real deadline because of expecting the baby at the end of April. So yeah, I'm very happy that it's going to print now, active distribution. The kind of anarchist distro who have published my other books have organised all the printing, which I really appreciate, and I should get the copies in mid-March, so I'll be sending them out hopefully by the 20th of March, just in time. Hopefully I don't go into early labour. But yeah, so this episode I just wanted to kind of like chat about the book really and what it's about, with the hope that maybe folks will buy it or share it with people or just get involved somehow. So I'm going to read you the kind of blurb at the back that my friend Kez wrote. Actually I wrote a draft and she edited it. We had a real fun game editing the book. I don't know if people know Kez Otterleaf, like she's amazing, like trans woman who's written all these like awesome like speculative fiction novels about resistance and just like really beautiful writer. And I've been kind of paying her to help me kind of like get the book done and listen to me and kind of transcribe what I'm saying, and then I'll edit it and then she'll edit it. And but we were joking for the back of the book of like just my writing of like blah blah blah, roses, 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 blah blah blah, tool in the toolbox, blah 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 blah. And it's probably not funny unless you've been involved in writing, but I think you don't realize until you produce something of this size like quite how dependent you are on like certain certain terms. Like I think a tool in the toolbox, like I searched the drive and it was like there like 80 times or something completely ridiculous. And I loved her editing because she always kind of like called out how things like the state shouldn't have metaphors that were like based on living beings. So like I wrote a sentence about like the tentacles of state violence and she was like, no, I love squids and octopus, like the state do not get tentacles. And it was just like it's just so funny. So anyway, so we've put the state has weapons and the rest of us have hearts and tentacles and living beautiful things. Okay, so this is the blurb. State violence is a brutal reality for vast numbers of people. It is an experience that is racialized, classed and gendered in its design and application. It intersects with nearly all forms of oppression. Plant medicines can be a tool for solidarity and resistance. They can practically support us to survive and they can help us recover from trauma. From herbal care for handcuff injuries to healing from incarceration, this book looks at examples from around the world of herbal solidarity in practice. Writing from her lived experience of incarceration, political organising, and of running the Solidarity Apothecary, Nicole Rose explores some of the many connections between herbalism and struggles for liberation. Through recipes, remedies, and stories from the herbal frontlines, she invites us to connect with our allies in struggle, the plants, to rest, to heal, and to continue the fight. It's so funny how uncomfortable I felt being referenced on the back, but I've kind of like settled into it now, and I'm really happy with it. So I'll put a link in the show notes where you can order it. It's £12. I ship worldwide. Unfortunately, it's so big. It's 444 pages, so it's really chunky. It's like 3-4 times the size of my other books. So it kind of counts as like a small parcel. So like to ship to America is like £20. I was just like, oh God, no one's going to order it. But it's only £3.50 for people in the UK. And I think like £11 for people in mainland Europe. So anyway, I'm sorry about the cost of it. Hopefully we can get it across the Atlantic at some point so it's like more affordable and accessible for people. But yeah, I know it's kind of a big investment for folks living in the US and Canada and stuff. So I appreciate your orders. If you're paying that much for postage, it really means the world to me that, yeah, the orders are still coming through. Okay, so let's chat about the book. So just a bit of like origin, I guess. I originally wanted to make a zine. All my books start out as like, let's do a zine. Like The Prisoner's Herbal was meant to be a zine and then became this big thing. But yeah, like I put a call out in January 2020 and I wanted to include examples from different projects around the world, from people doing kind of solidarity work with people experiencing state violence and using herbalism. And then, as people can remember, the pandemic hit and just kind of like all hell broke loose, really, like over those years. Like it was, yeah, super intense in terms of, organising the clinic in Calais and doing loads of kind of herbal solidarity stuff and getting care packages out to people left, right and centre. And but I did get, like in that first wave, I did get lots of amazing contributions, which I'll talk about. And then, I kind of had it on the back burner and was like gently putting together some of the other bits of content. And then kind of once my nausea and vomiting shifted at sort of 6 months into my pregnancy, I just was like, I want to do this thing. Like, it's a perfect project for me while I'm pretty much still housebound. I mean, my nausea's like, shitloads better, but I'm still, I still get sick if I travel in the car and stuff like that. So I thought it's a really good project to do while I'm in that kind of like homebound nesting mode. And I spoke to Kez and she was up for supporting me. And yeah, it just became my like full-time focus. So I've just been squirreling away at it very intensely, and very happy that it's kind of complete. But yeah, I think if I wasn't pregnant, I would have taken more like spaciousness over it and maybe cultivated a few other contributions. Like there's some people that really wanted to send things in and I didn't get back to them in time, like my friend Heather in Mexico, and I feel really bad about it. And I think, I hate myself that I have a tendency to do things sometimes too quickly. But at the same time, I'm also aware that on the autoresponder of my emails has been like about the book and calls for contributions. And I have had them come through the last couple of years. So it has been in like the ether for a long time, if that makes sense. Anyway, it is what it is. And I'm just seeing it. Like there's a section at the beginning of the book where I'm kind of talking about like the limitations of the book and content I would have loved to included. And, in that, I just say like there's just like endless examples of state violence. And there's so many beautiful iterations of herbalism around the world and people doing amazing work that, like I said, it's at 444 pages. Like it would have been difficult to get any more contributions in there. So I'm just seeing it as like, this is just like, first off the gate kind of thing. Like this is just a first step, and that I'll continue to interview people, for example, on this podcast and in other projects, and maybe we could do a volume 2 or something, I don't know, but it really is just kind of like, the kind of foundations, if that makes sense. Okay, so a little bit about what's inside. So the first part is about like state violence and the body, and it's kind of introducing, what are the connections between herbalism and state violence, and about kind of trauma in the body and different sort of nervous system states and how trauma contributes to chronic illness. A lot of the content in this first section is drawing on the work that I've done with my Herbalism, PTSD and traumatic stress course, but it's obviously just kind of an introduction to that because that's, like a massive course with 60 lessons and a lot of content. But I also talk about collective responses to trauma, like, and how, this kind of framework that I've shared on Instagram and in the course and stuff, like about kind of rest, release, reconnect and resistance, like these kind of 4 stages of trauma recovery, which are more kind of collectively orientated. And then there is a contribution about polyvagal theory, and there's also a really beautiful contribution about kind of plant imagination. So like for people, for example, that are incarcerated who can't actually access herbs, like physically, they can, do like a journey with plants. And I think it's, like just like a lovely contribution to the book. And then part 2 is all about kind of state repression. So this is like state repression in terms of people being criminalized, in terms of repression against political organizers. Like I share about my kind of decade of state repression and what happened to our campaign and the kind of various layers of like police violence and surveillance and media work and everything else that kind of suppressed our resistance. So in this section, I've got like a whole bunch of stuff. There's things around like herbal support for shock and kind of police raids. There's a large piece about herbal support for panic attacks. And there's also some stuff in there around kind of like long-term chronic stress and kind of defendant support. So like if you're someone experiencing repression, you've got like an impending court case or something, for example, it's kind of like how do you navigate that? Like, how do you take care of yourself? Different strategies. Like, I've been supporting defendants for a really, really, really long time. I've seen everything under the sun, from people that, completely avoid what's going on to people that are like super kind of controlling about the whole thing. And just kind of like top tips, I guess, of how to navigate that kind of like chronic enduring state violence. And then I've got stuff around like court support packs from my experiences with the apothecary. Some lovely stuff from the US where people from this amazing project called Herbalista were sending like these like aromatherapy sniffers to people like kind of caught up in the J20 case. There's like various tea blends and glycerite blends. There's a really lovely contribution about kind of like a soothing kind of herbal milk blend, like with different spices. That's like wonderful for the nervous system. There's stuff around nutritional resilience and also kind of how trauma affects the gut. And also a really beautiful contribution about kind of life in like forest defense and different kind of herbal remedies for tear gas and stuff like that. So yeah, it's like a very chunky section. I guess it's been like a real mainstay of the Solidarity Apothecary, is supporting people going through trials and kind of experiencing that kind of long-term repression. So yeah. And then part 3 is all about police violence. So this is kind of more like street medic stuff. So there's I've kind of like brought together different resources, because obviously there's like a billion online, right? But I've just tried to like pick not the best ones, but like the most useful ones around kind of like riot medicine and what to pack as a street medic and stuff. And there's like a little bit in there about my experiences. And then I kind of share part of a zine that was produced about herbal first aid aftercare for people who've experienced police violence, from like a collective who put that together during the George Floyd uprising. So I'm super grateful for that contribution. And I've got things in there from that, including like liver support, respiratory support, from kind of chemical weapons exposure, like remedies for handcuff injuries, taser injuries, things like this. There's contribution about mugwort, hydrosol as kind of like chemical weapon aftercare. And then I've got some examples of support that was sent to people engaged in this kind of like frontline resistance stuff, in the sense of like occupations against this like high-speed railway in the UK, and also like the Badger Coal in the UK, which is kind of like this state project to murder like thousands of badgers, mostly around the southwest of England. So yeah, and there's like different recipes in that section again, like fire cider, and a different project about getting tea out to people during the Black Lives Matter kind of movement, kind of resurgence or uprising in 2020, and stuff around how to support a herbal call to action. So again, another very comprehensive section. And then part 4 is like all about prison. So yeah, I share a little bit about my time inside and about practicing herbalism in prison, and kind of give this prisoner's herbal context. And then I talk about kind of like recovery really from prison, and like healing from incarceration, healing from PTSD. There's content in there about like herbal support for nightmares. And then there's this kind of like, like more content, I guess, for people like on the outside. So like how it feels to be engaged in like long-term prisoner support, whether that's for comrades or whether that's for your best friends or your partner. I've got resources there about herbs for prison visits, for after phone calls, for grief, anger and rage. And then, there's kind of other contributions and other recipes and stuff in that section. And I just want to say, like, I think the healing from incarceration article was like maybe one of the most challenging ones to write. Like, it is quite in depth about those first few kind of like survival stages when you first get out of prison, and then this kind of longer term navigation of like how the hell do you process like that much like trauma, right? Or especially if people have done a long sentence, like how do you live differently, like after seeing things that humans shouldn't see, for example. So I really hope for people who have been in prison that article in particular is really useful. I'd love to hear people's feedback from it once they've read it. Okay, and then part 5 is all about border violence. So there's quite a long article kind of introducing the border regime and like the different, I'm not going to say tentacles because Kez will tell me off, but like the different manifestations of that, whether that's detention centres or deportations, or whether that's like the kind of reporting system or how people are like dispersed in terms of housing and stuff. I also talk a little bit about other borders like across Europe and in the US and Mexico and surveillance and all sorts of things. And then I really kind of go into detail about the clinic. So there's an interview there with my friend Victor, who I did a podcast interview on the show with, about the clinic and how it works and what's been happening. And then I've written a kind of like longer piece about like top tips for like organizing a clinic. So, I have a lot of people contact me like expressing interest in getting involved or expressing interest in doing something similar. And I've just kind of like put in like half a decades of experience into that article of like, I think you need to think about this, this and this, and I wish we'd done this, this and this. And, it's very like personal. Like I haven't written that piece with other people in the clinic, if that makes sense, but it's like a summary of my experiences kind of doing the work and talking about it with people and all our debriefs and stuff like that. So I hope that'll be really useful for people. And it just would mean the world to me, like if this book did kind of act as a catalyst for people to start like similar projects at different kind of border hotspots. And then I've shared a bunch of the kind of remedies and recipes that we use from the clinic in Calais. So things like our cough syrup, chest rubs, immune tonic, bruise ointments, like our different sprays for wounds and things like scabies and stuff. And then just like other things we use in our clinic, again, with the thinking that if you were going to start the same thing, this would be like really, really helpful for you. And then I've got some other kind of examples of herbal solidarity in practice, supporting like displaced people and supporting asylum seekers in Ireland, for example. Again, I would have loved to have had like more variety in that section. Like I would have loved to have had some interviews with people like working on the border in Mexico, for example. But, it is what it is. And there's like tons of content in there. And like, like the whole point of this book is to have this like variety of content that meets people's needs, like whether that's you're looking for a like specific recipe that you can kind of repeat and use like in your project or your herbal practice, or whether that's you just want to understand like the kind of border regime better, or you just want to like maybe start a project but you don't know where to start. Like I just hope that these different kind of threads of this book will be useful. And then part 6 is focusing on like genocide, occupation and war. So I've got like a piece about plant medicines in a war context. So I look at kind of how plants have been used through history really in different kind of like war zones and like medical contexts. And then I share like about Ukraine Herbal Solidarity, and that's like literally just my perspective on that project and what happened and my feelings about it. It's not anything that has been written kind of collectively, like I made that clear at the start of that piece. But I think again, it will be really interesting to people that want to do potentially something similar, or hopefully will feel inspired about like what is possible. And I talk about like the nuances of like, very long-term projects like our clinic in Calais versus like short-term responses to like, for example, the genocidal invasion of Ukraine. And just the fact that like herbal solidarity can look really different. Like it can look like I've made like 6 care packages for local refugee women like living in my local town. And for those people, like it feels amazing that they've got like body oils and bath oils and like foot care cream. Or it could look like I'm starting a project on the border that I'm going to dedicate the next 20 years to. Like, there's just like so many options about how we can use like herbal medicine in practice to support people and organize, against oppression and challenge the state and be engaged in that kind of active mutual aid work. So I also talk about Palestine in that section, and there's a recipe for lavender oil, which I like talk about loads, but I'm such a lavender oil drug dealer. It's just like the best thing ever. So how to make that. And then we've got a really beautiful contribution about herbal remedies, like rooted in ancestral Armenian practices, and talking about the genocide there. So again, like I would have loved to have had more content in that section. Obviously there's lots of different contexts of genocide and occupation and war around the world. And again, like I write in the introduction to that section, that it really is just like, asking questions, like more than anything, like what is the role of herbalism in self-defense? Like what is the role of herbalism in combat situations? Like, how can we optimize like local grassroots medical infrastructure and build that infrastructure now, and do we have to wait for like high intensity conflict with mass death? Like what about, the state's war on people, like poverty and, policies that are killing people, and, just like capitalism. So yeah, anyway, there's lots of questions. Like the whole thing is just like a big like, yo, herbalists, what are we doing? Like, how can we do more of this? What's the role in plant medicines in this context? Like it's all the things that have been like buzzing around in my head for 15 years. Okay, and then part 7 is kind of like a plantized section. So I've shared 10 different plants that are kind of like frequently referenced through the book, everything from betony to vervain. And yeah, they're kind of just like for people, if you're using these plants if you're working with these plants to kind of know a little bit more about them, like some of their other indications or contraindications. Yeah, just kind of, some of the kind of herbs in our sort of like nervine materia medica. So, nervines are herbs with an affinity for the nervous system. So I've tried to include different ones in there, like cardiac nervines and nervine relaxants and some nerve tonics and things. And then there's a conclusion called Plants as Comrades Against and Beyond the State, where I just am like going on a very passionate rant about the role of plant medicines and moving towards a world without the state, without this kind of organized hierarchical violence that determines our lives. So yeah, my anarchist readers will enjoy that piece. And then part 8 is all kind of resources, so things on like medicine making basics, harvesting and drying. There's like a comprehensive glossary, and then there's just like several pages about the Solidarity Apothecary and stuff, and Kez's work, and a big index which I did manually, which is so much work, but I do think indexes are great for books. Like I use them frequently, and I want people to be able to like jump around the book, like it's not like some really intense kind of novel that you have to read from front to back. It's really like a reference book where you can go where your kind of inspiration takes you, where your needs take you. So yeah, that is it. Like I said, it is a beast. It's 444 pages. It's not like summarizing my life's work, but it is like a real milestone, I think, for the Solidarity Apothecary and my work in the world, and trying to like bridge these connections. Like I talk in the introduction about how I want anarchists and people engaged in social struggle to kind of like have less prejudice, to be honest, about herbal medicine, and see the kind of importance of things like collective care and sustaining our movements and taking care of each other, so that we can keep resisting the state, and not treating each other like disposable. And then I also hope with the other angle that it inspires herbalists to think like, how can I organize in my community and my networks to support people who are experiencing the most kind of oppression and marginalization. And because like the herbal kind of scene, at least in the UK, like can be very privileged, right? Very white, very middle class. And I think like this book is hopefully something, like a dandelion pushing up the concrete. It can be similar in terms of being like, hey, like herbalism can be revolutionary, like it can be liberatory. Like we can work with these amazing plants to support people to push back against forms of oppression and repression. Like we can, not just take care of our bodies in this real like individualistic wellness culture way, but in a way that's like deeply caring about our communities and what people are experiencing. And a lot of state violence is very invisibilized, like vast numbers of people in prison being affected by the prison system, super invisibilized. Like what happens in Calais is like super invisible to most people. Most people going through some form of political oppression are generally very alienated and kind of lonely in those experiences. So I want to kind of bring all those forms of state violence to light, and I want to kind of inspire people to think about how we can support folks and how herbs can be this tool. Because if you're listening to this, I'm sure you love plant medicines, and sure you don't need me to talk about it, but they are just amazing, right? And it's been such a joy and an honor to be able to share some of their medicine like via these words and via this book. So yeah, I hope you can pick up a copy. Like I said, I'm going to be posting them out on the 20th of March, and I haven't decided what to do with the copies that I don't sell, because my plan is basically to close my shop for physical posting of orders. by the end of March, because I just don't want to be doing it during maternity leave. So yeah, if you want a physical copy, basically order it soon, like order it in March. Otherwise, yeah, I guess it kind of depends on how many I sell. Like if I have loads left, then I'll probably will have to find some other option or give them back to active distribution or something. But I'm really hoping I can shift as many as I can. All the funds from the book, by the way, like obviously they'll be going to pay the cost of the printing, and also some kind of debt I have with the prisoners' herbal books, because like the majority of the prisoner herbal books go to prisoners and I don't get money for those, like sales for those, so I have to find other creative fundraising ways to cover those costs. And I'm grateful that Active are like super flexible and patient with me of paying back how much I owe them. But yeah, other kind of profit from the book will be going towards like herbal solidarity packs for people, things like that, and just kind of sustaining the general costs of the Solidarity Apothecary. And yeah, I hope post maternity leave that I'll be able to crack into action again with getting herbs out to people and supporting people one-to-one. It's definitely been difficult with the kind of violent vomiting and nausea to sustain what I'm doing, but yeah, I'm excited about the future and excited about this book. So I hope you can support it. I hope you can pick up a copy. I think there's something for everyone in there, or at least everyone into herbal medicine and state violence. I mean, it is such a niche, right? Like that's what's hilarious about it, is it's like, really? Like connecting these two things? But yeah, they are definitely connected. And yeah, okay, I'm going to stop talking. I hope you will pick up a copy or feel inspired to. Feel free to ask me any questions. You can also download the contents in the first few pages of the book off my site. Yeah, and I'm also keen to donate copies to people in prison or prisoner family members on low incomes, things like that. So yeah, if there's a barrier there, like please let me know. But otherwise, yeah, I look forward to getting in the post to you. Oh yeah, the other thing is I've only got 100 copies of my Overcoming Burnout book. So that's like the only 100 copies in the world that are like physically books, if that makes sense. So if you want one of them before they run out, then please order them ASAP as well. They are £5. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna have a rest now. Feeling very, very, very pregnant. But yeah, thank you for listening. And I'm gonna publish an episode later this week or early next week with another herbalist who's engaged in solidarity medicine making. So keep a lookout for that. Okay, thanks. Take care. Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarityapothecary.org/podcast.